Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Age of Quarantine. My name is Chris Enriquez. I am your host. If you like the show and you ever want to watch past episodes, you can go on YouTube and look up Age of Quarantine. It's on my YouTube channel. If you look up Christopher Enriquez, most of the episodes are there. And if you like watching them on the St. Vitus YouTube channel, that's cool too. I'm sorry, the St. Vitus Instagram channel. It's on the IGTV. Also, we have select episodes on the Revolver Magazine YouTube channel. The show has been going on for several months now, and I want to thank all of you for your support. It's absolutely blown our minds in terms of the guests we've been able to get and how far it's really come along. This week has been absolutely exciting, really great guests. Last night we had Martin Bisi, who of course produced Swans and Sonic Youth, to name a few. Tomorrow we have Inter Arma, and yeah, it's just been absolutely amazing, the guests that we've been getting on the show. You might notice that you hear some music in the background. That's actually Judge, one of the most legendary New York hardcore bands, especially in the straight edge movement. Very important band. Came out of the Youth Crew movement, which also included bands like Side by Side, Youth of Today, Project X, Bold. My guest tonight is none other than John Porcelli, aka Porcell, the lead guitar player of Shelter and Judge, and many bands that I had mentioned. We are so excited to have him on the show. He's such a big part of the scene, and for me and my friends growing up, seeing Shelter was life-changing, and the message they brought and just the difference they made in people's lives and continue to. It's amazing. Judge and Shelter have both played at St. Vitus. Youth of Today I've seen so many times. Man, they still bring it, man. But yeah, we're really excited. I want to give a huge shout out to my friends at Revelation Records, specifically to Sammy Siegler, the drummer of Civ and Judge and Rival Schools. And he's got some great new bands and great records coming out on Revelation Records, so I want to shout out him. Check out Worlds Be Free's got some new stuff coming out, and he's got a new band called Constant Elevation with Vinny from Movie Life and Yanni from Caspian and Mike from I'm the Avalanche. They got a new record out. It's great. Pick it up. World Be Free, of course, is with Scott Vogel of Terror, who's going to be on the show next week, so I'll be talking to him. But it looks like Porcell has joined, and we're going to send him an invite to get him on the screen. He's got so much cool shit going on and such an interesting life that I can't wait to go back and talk to him about his history as a musician, as a Hare Krishna, as a graphic designer, as a yoga instructor, as a guitar player, as a singer. Man, we'll see if we even have time to get through all of it. So without further ado, I'm going to get John Porcelli, aka Porcell, the hardcore yogi, on the screen. Chat for the next hour. Thanks for spending your Thursday night with us. Hello. How are
What's
you?
up, brother?
Nothing much, man. I'm so excited to have you on Age of Quarantine. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here, man.
Absolutely. I don't know if you saw my intro, but you specifically in your role in the bands that you've been in, and as an animal rights activist and as someone in the straight edge movement, man, you changed the lives of me and all my friends. I'm from New York, and man, I used to go see Shelter in the 90s, and then I went backwards to all your bands. So really excited to have you here, man.
Dude, I remember you from the shows.
No shit.
Yeah, I remember just seeing you around like a scene guy.
Oh man, well that means a lot, man. I really appreciate that. I'll never forget Coney Island High. I think it was.
Yeah, the Coney Island High days, like the whole wetlands, Coney Island High thing.
Yeah. That was which album was out when I saw Shelter at Coney Island High? It was before Attaining the Supreme.
Yeah.
And that was a hell of a show. Right now, all of your followers have just tuned in, so they missed my intro. I just want to start by saying this is the Age of Quarantine, a weekly or a daily rather web series on the St. Vitus channel, where I know you've played some shows, Porcell, and we spend the hour Monday through Friday at 8 o'clock talking to our favorite artists, asking questions, and in front of a live audience. So if it's cool with you, I just kind of want to dig into your musical history, and we got an hour to go through it. So yeah.
All right, let's do it,
man. Well, first of all, have you been managing to get through this crazy pandemic?
it was pretty bad for me because my job was a traveling yoga instructor,
Yeah.
and pretty much my whole year of yoga, retreats and things like that, everything got canceled. And then, we had a lot of touring booked too. We had touring booked, for June and July. Both Judge and Youth Today were doing some like pretty big festivals in Europe. And then we were supposed to, tour in the fall. And just like one by one, like dominoes, everything got canceled. So
Unbelievable, man. I saw that that Youth of Today was playing some interesting festivals that were kind of going a little bit outside of just the hardcore scene, which I thought was really cool because I love that you're still able to reach new audiences at this point.
yeah,
It's so
weird. It's weird, here it is, decades later. The cool thing about Youth of Today specifically is, that we just constantly get new kids, because if you're like a 16-year-old kid in 2020 and you get into straight edge, someone's going to be like, oh, you're into straight edge? Here's Minor Threat. Here's Youth of Today. Here's Gorilla Biscuits. So we just became one of those bands that if you're straight edge, someone's going to give you our record.
Absolutely.
And so we constantly get these new kids. It's really cool.
I think it's great. And I noticed that just having seen you guys over the past 10 years at like Market Hotel right before all this went down with the Disengage lineup, and you're seeing people of all generations there. And I was listening to the Where It Went podcast where he also talked about that, which is great. And, man, there's something to be said about staying in shape. You and Ray, you bring it just as much as you did in the 80s. You know what I mean? It's wild to see that.
It's yoga.
There you go. Well, we'll go into that.
I can't recommend it enough. Like, yoga will keep you young and flexible, and it'll keep that movement in your body. And it's just really kind of miraculous stuff.
Absolutely, man. I actually train at Gavin Van Black's gym, which I should give a shout out to. Gavin from Burn and Absolution has a gym, Physical Culture Collective, which I know you did a yoga class at, which I missed. But I'm turning 40 this year, and when I started seeing Gavin in training and really getting into physical culture, whether it was martial arts or yoga, I can honestly say that I'm in better shape going into my 40s than I was in my 20s, or maybe even my teenage years. And it's very true what the body can do if you treat it well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And, well, if you eat a good diet, luckily for me, I ate just like a regular American diet, junk food, hamburgers, pizza, my whole life growing up. But when I was 19, I became vegetarian and I got way into health food. And luckily my first job when I moved to New York City was at a health food store. So at this place called Prana Foods. It was on First Avenue and 7th. And so from that time on, I've really been very, very careful about, eating healthy, eating right, plant-based diet, cutting meat out.
Yeah.
I tell you, it pays off. It pays off. For everybody that laughed at me back then because vegetarianism was so weird and so foreign, here I am decades later, and I'm healthy, and I weigh the same that I weighed in my senior year of high school. And
that's amazing, man. I want to start. I want to get to all that stuff, and I try to go in chronological order, but I kind of fell off track here. I know you grew up in Connecticut, so we're going to go back to your early days and kind of like go through everything. But you grew up in Connecticut. You eventually moved to New York City. Is New York City your home currently?
Well, I actually did not grow up in Connecticut. Ray grew up in Connecticut. He's from Danbury. I grew up in Westchester in this town. It's called Golden's Bridge, which is right next to Katona.
Okay.
So I'm actually from New York. Technically I'm from the suburbs of New York.
Yes.
Westchester is really kind of like nice place. It wasn't like growing up in the Lower East Side. But we did move to New York City in when I had like just turned 19. and I moved to the city.
What
And
are
then
your
I lived there till I lived there for probably like 11, 12 years, something like that.
Okay, so you're no longer in New York these days.
No, now I live in upstate New York. Ray lives up here too. Actually, Craig lives up here too. Craig from Sick of It All. I see him all the time, and I see Gavin all the time too.
Yeah, because Gavin's got the barn up there. I was just texting with Craig to get him on the show as well, actually, because a light bulb went off when I heard the two of you guys on. Well, it was you and Drew that were on the Where It Went podcast, and you were talking about Craig. I'm like, I should reach out to him too. So with the help of Sammy Siegler, which I gave a shout out to on Revelation Records, I was able to pull a lot of cool guests together. So shout out to Sammy and Revelation. What are your earliest memories of before hardcore and before punk rock, when you first realized that music had a deeper meaning to you?
Oh man, I was always into music. From the time I was like 6 years old. Anything that I could get my hands on. I used to have. I'm like super old. So back in school, we used to have these mono cassette recorders, and you'd press play and record at the same time, and you could record thing and had a built-in microphone. So I had a Chuck Wagon radio. I don't know if you remember like Purina Chuck Wagon dog food, but they had this radio that was like Chuck Wagon. And so I used to make mixtapes, but I used to take this mono cassette recorder and I used to listen to the rock radio stations. And anytime like a Foreigner song came on or like a Led Zeppelin song came on, I'd be like, oh man, and I'd miss like the first 10 seconds of the song, but I would tape it onto a cassette tape. And, it was really arduous because, it would take like 2 weeks to make one tape. But then I'd have all these rock songs, recorded really poorly through the air. And I used to just listen to them all the time. I was just super into music from the time I was just a really little kid. I don't know, it was just something about like rock music and heavy music and energetic music that just reached out and just like grabbed me by the throat and would not let me go.
I love that. You got some people that can relate. At 84 Slumber says those Chuck Wagon commercials ruled, and someone just said they did the same thing when they were young back in the day. That's pretty funny stuff.
Yeah, I got into punk pretty early too. I was even like before I was a teenager. I was like 12. I got into punk, and what really struck me about punk was the lyrics. Before that, I just listened to like Kiss and Alice Cooper and like, Jethro Tull and Zeppelin and, just stuff like that.
Rock music in general. What was out?
Just like rock music, but like on the heavier side, I really liked it. But, when I heard bands like the Sex Pistols and, the Clash, and you really listen to what they have to say, and it's just like, whoa, like this is kind of deep stuff. This is stuff that really says something to my life and inspires me and speaks to me in a really real way. Bands like Stiff Little Fingers. I mean, those were lyrics that you just didn't hear in rock music, which basically was just like, Kiss lyrics. They're dumb. They're dumb.
Yes, yes.
It's all about partying and girls and this and that and whatever. It's rock and roll, but it's not something deep that inspires you and speaks to your heart,
Absolutely. I mean, when you mention the Clash and Sex Pistols, and the obvious thing about punk rock, which is that there is, it's the social unrest being discussed, whether it's political or just feeling like an outsider. Was there something about your life, at least what I could say, which is probably for a lot of people, for myself, I grew up in a town in Long Island, New York, where I got picked on a lot by jocks and stuff like that. So it was just kind of like, as soon as I heard heavy metal and then eventually hardcore music, there was something about that felt like a release. Was there something about the way that you grew up that made you relate to the message that you would hear from the Clash or the Sex Pistols and bands like that?
Yeah, I think, one big thing that had an impact on me was, my dad, we grew up in Westchester. So Westchester's a rich place. So my dad kind of like, he was sort of like, he had the American dream, you know. He worked hard. He was a businessman. He had a really good job. He made a lot of money. He bought a house in Westchester with the picket fence and, really nice cars, 2 cars in the garage. And that's basically what everybody was after. That was considered like the American dream. Like, you do this, you work hard, you make money, you're going to move to the suburbs, you're going to have a nice house, and then you're going to be happy.
Yeah.
And, I could see that, my dad, my mom were always fighting. They eventually got divorced. And then even though my dad had a lot of money and had the big house and everything, and we lived in, material comfort, right, I could tell that he wasn't happy, and he wasn't satisfied at heart, and he didn't like his job, and he didn't have like a passion in his life that he was like passionate about, that woke him up in the morning. He was excited to do, like, every day was drudgery. He went to a job he didn't like with his briefcase. He left really early in the morning and came back late at night. He was exhausted. And then on the weekends, he would just kind of like watch TV and just relax or whatever, and whatever. He did that for, 40 years. And I could tell there was like a deep, like, unfulfillment in him, or, sadness in him.
Yeah.
And so from a young age, I could understand, like, this stuff that America's telling us to do, like this lifestyle, especially for kids in Westchester, because you're really groomed for that lifestyle. I went to a very upper middle class high school. And, you're groomed to go to college, get a really good job, become a doctor, become a lawyer, become whatever, a really successful businessman. That's what you're expected to do. You came from that kind of money. And I could just see, like, I don't want this. Like, I can see the flaw in this. I can see it doesn't make my dad happy. I can see all my other friends' parents, very, very wealthy, driving Mercedes. They don't seem very happy to me.
Right.
Maybe what the dead Kennedys are saying has some relevance, and maybe it's got some weight to it. And so I was very much into looking into, like, alternative ways of living besides the American dream, even when I was like a little kid.
Yeah, 12, 13 years old seems to be a common age, for a lot of people when they start to question those things, which seems strange to think about now. But, I was about 12, 13 when I was really starting to try to find a place where I belonged, and some kind of salvation or some kind of escape. When you, so around what time did you learn how to play guitar? Like, when and how did that happen?
My dad bought me a guitar for Christmas. I think I was 14.
Okay, so it's right around that same time.
Yeah. I was about 14 years old. I took guitar lessons for about 3 months. And then my guitar teacher said, he said, why don't you bring in some records and we'll learn some of the songs. Bring in some of your favorite records. I'll try to teach you the songs. Because I've been learning chords and bar chords and things like that. And he's like, you're probably not going to be able to play them, like the people play them on the record, but maybe we can do just a very simple version of it. And so the record that I brought in was the first Ramones record.
Hell yeah.
I said, I want to learn Blitzkrieg Bop, the first song. And he put it on, and he had never heard music like that. I mean, this guy's like a virtuoso guitar player.
Right.
He's into, like, really advanced kind of jazz stuff. And you can imagine his face when he drops the needle on Blitzkrieg Bop.
Right, right.
It's almost like caveman music.
Like if you're into like Mahavishnu Orchestra or something, or Yes, and then you put that
yeah,
on.
totally. So he's listening to it and he starts laughing. And he said, this music is so simplistic. You could have probably played this the first 2 weeks. And he said, you can already play it. You already know bar chords. It's 3 bar chords.
Right.
And he said, it's all downstrokes. It's 3 bar chords. This is like a gorilla could play this. And he showed me how to play.
Yeah. Meanwhile, you're probably like, yeah, that's what I want.
Yeah, he showed me how to play Blitzkrieg Bop. I went home that night. I learned the whole entire Ramones record. The whole next week, I learned like every single Clash song.
Wow.
And then I would just forget lessons. Like, I already know everything I need to know. Like 3 chords and the truth. I'm ready to do this.
Absolutely, yeah. The power chord for anyone into punk rock can really open up a whole new dimension, right?
Yeah, totally. You know, I love
That's
that
amazing.
Damned record. You ever see that Damned record? Um, God,
Which one? The first one before
was it?
they?
I think it was Smash It Up. On the version that I had the first pressing, and it came with like it came with like an album sleeve, and on it it had it printed like how to play a D chord, how to play a G chord, and how to play a C chord.
Oh, that's so funny.
And then it says something like, "Okay, now go out and start a band."
Wow, that
And
that was like when like the packaging really could make a difference too. Like, nowadays it's like all streaming, but you pick up those records, and it used to be just like, who are they thanking? Who should I listen to? What bands are they friends with? And what are the lyrics? But that's next level. What you're saying.
yeah, the packaging, especially on punk records, was like so important to the whole vibe of the band. Nowadays you just don't have that, which is kind of a shame.
Yeah, I see there's a lot of like, hardcore in general and aggressive music has really, which I'm sure you've noticed from the festivals that you're playing. I'm sure it's hard to keep up with like all the new young bands. Even I'm aging at this point, but there is a huge resurgence of hardcore out there right now over the past few years.
Yeah, for
It's
sure.
really something else.
Even straight edge too. There's a lot of really good like young new straight edge bands out.
I was going to say, I need to explore that a little more. I hope that's the case. I'm sober myself, and I think that, as I saw hardcore really starting to come back in aggressive music, I was wondering, like, where the sort of straight edge bands and where the vegan bands and all that stuff. I'm sure if I dig deeper, I can find them. But as a whole, it's just great to see punk and hardcore, coming back big time. All the shows at St. Vitus and Market Hotel, and even the big festivals, you're seeing a lot of cool bands coming up.
Yeah, you want to know what's strange about hardcore? It's almost like every other genre of underground music got really big. Like hip hop got really like back in the '80s in New York, like really underground like thrash metal like Metallica and bands like that, Megadeth. It was super underground. It was almost like hardcore. Like you had
Yeah,
to gig for it. The shows were very small. Like I saw Metallica on the Ride Lightning tour at a club. It was just like a hardcore show. And even like hip hop, when hip hop first started, it was very much like that. It was very underground, small shows in crappy clubs. And it just seems like hip hop and metal just got like huge.
oh yeah,
Even punk got huge. But hardcore just kind of stayed small. And it's almost the beauty of it.
oh, it's great though. I mean, that's why venues like St. Vitus, I think, are so vital, and why Vitus even came to be, because it was like there was a weird time in the early 2000s where it just wasn't cool for some reason to be into aggressive music, and then right around 2009, I think a lot of like the folks that I hang with, the owners of St. Vitus, started to notice like people were tired of the suit and tie bands, and they really wanted aggressive music again. And even in a small club like Vitus, 250 kids showing up every night to go nuts. It's something that was missing for a while in New York after Coney Island and Wetlands and CB's went away. So
Yeah.
it's great. Shout out
St.
to
Vitus really filled that void for a small club, packed, people going nuts. I love playing there. It's a great club.
absolutely, man. Yeah, two of the best shows I saw before COVID were Shelter at St. Vitus and Youth of Today at Market Hotel. So that was fun.
Yeah, that was a fun show.
Shout out to a couple of the folks that are mentioning some straight edge bands that we should check out. At Hal Capone 1, Sect is amazing. I've heard of them. I'll check them out. L to the row.
Sect is the drummer for Fall Out Boy's band.
Oh, no shit. Okay.
Yeah, they're good.
Interesting. And then L to the row is suggesting Life Force. I've heard of them. I'll have to
Life
check
Force
them.
from Chicago, they're really good. Another great band from Pennsylvania's One Step Closer.
Okay. Yeah.
Another good band is Magnitude. Really,
Magnitude is great.
yeah.
Good band. Well, so
Torso, that band of Revelation, is also really good with the girl singer.
Oh, I heard about them. I haven't checked them out yet, but Sammy's telling me about a lot of the new signings lately.
Yeah.
Yeah, Magnitude's dope. So I had a feeling I'd get sidetracked a lot because I know so much about you, and but there's also so much I want to cover. When did you become part of the New York hardcore scene, and how did that take place? You know, talk about first shows, records, experiences, and all that.
Well, my dad worked in New York City, and in the 80s, New York City was like a mess. I mean, it was like urban blight, especially like he used to drive through the Bronx. It's all burnt out buildings. There was a lot of crime, especially like the Lower East Side, Greenwich Village was just like drugs everywhere. It's funny too, because it made a lot of sense. That guy Serpico lives in upstate New York, and my son works at this health food store, and Serpico, that guy that they made that movie with Al Pacino.
Yep.
And so he comes into the health food store all the time. So my son is always talking to him. And so my son was asking me about him, and I was like, I don't really know too much about him either. And so we watched this documentary, and the documentary was all about, him as a cop in the 80s. And, in the 80s, it was almost like every single cop was on the take, because crack was becoming huge, and these drug dealers started making like enormous amounts of money. So they were paying off all the cops. Like, I used to be in the Lower East Side. There'd be people like, smoking crack right on the street. You hang out in Tompkins Square Park. There's people being mugged. There's people smoking crack. There's people like doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And I was always thinking, like, where are the cops? And it was almost like, there was people just committing all sorts of crimes just right out in the open. And the cops just didn't care. They were all paid off by the drug dealers to just kind of like hang out and stay away or whatever. And that's just like what New York was like. So, when I was like 15 and 16, I really wanted to go to shows, but, my dad was like, you ain't going to go to a show in New York City, forget about it. So I started going to shows in Connecticut, and the joke was on him, because I started going to shows at the old Anthrax, which was in Stamford, Connecticut.
Uh-huh.
And so my dad's thinking Connecticut. He's thinking like, Darien and, all these like, Connecticut's like a really kind of upscale place.
Right.
But Stamford is like a ghetto. It's almost worse than New York City, especially where the Anthrax was. So we used to go up there all the time. So I started going to shows in Connecticut, at the old Anthrax, it was such a cool place, man. It was the basement of an art gallery, and it literally held 50 people comfortably, but they would regularly shove like 70, 80 people in there, and it would just be like shoulder to shoulder, fire hazard, to the max. Like I saw, and it was weird because Connecticut was right between New York City and Boston. And so a lot of bands would just pick up an extra show when they were playing those like major markets. So every band played the Anthrax. I saw every band.
Yeah, like
Circle Jerk, 7 Seconds, DOA, The Descendants, Crucifix, Black Flag played there, Youth Brigade. You name it. Like every single band, back around then, from like the mid 80s, they all played the Anthrax. It was freaking incredible. You know what it was like seeing like the Circle Jerks in a place that held like 50 people with no stage? The ceiling was like literally this high. And it was really cool because upstairs was the art gallery, and you would just hang out with Keith Morris, and you would hang out with, Sean Stern from Youth Brigade. It was like, there was no pretension with the band. You'd be hanging out with the band. We were having snowball fights with Crucifix. And so
that's amazing.
It was a really amazing, cool scene. It just cut down the barrier between band and audience. You would get there early. You would meet the band. That's how we met 7 Seconds, became really good friends with Kevin Seconds. And I got to see all of my favorite bands. And it was just a really incredible time.
The videos, you can't tell how small it is, because I watch videos of like Beyond and a couple
that was later. That was when they moved to Norwalk, and it was actually a really big club. I mean, that club held 800,000 people easily. But the original Anthrax was in Stamford, and it was a tiny little shoebox. And it was so cool to see all these big bands in that tiny.
That makes sense. Yeah, because those videos, I think, were the second Anthrax. Now, how did that let's kind of like maybe mix this up into my next question, because how did that connect you to the New York City hardcore scene? And I'm assuming that when you were going to the Anthrax, this is where you met your friend and longtime collaborator, musical partner Ray Capo. That's I'm guessing where you guys kind of met each other.
Yeah, I met Ray I met him at the very first time I went to the Anthrax. I met him. He had an X on his hand. We instantly every single week. I mean, it got to the point where I didn't even care who was playing. Like, I remember Hose and AWOL. Like, it was actually Rick Rubin's band. He was in a band called Hose. Like, Hose and AWOL, sure, I'll go. You know? I think the first, we always loved the New York hardcore bands. Like, probably like, when I was like 16 years old, my favorite hardcore records was Cause for Alarm 7-inch, The Antidote 7-inch,
Oh hell yeah,
and The Abuse 7-inch, and Urban Waste. Those were like my four favorite. I used to collect records. Those were my four favorite, probably hardcore 7-inches, of the time. They were all from New York hardcore. I love the New York Thrash cassette. I love the Beastie Boys, 7-inch. This was even before Agnostic Front had a record.
Sure, yeah. This is the first wave, yeah.
And this is way before the Cro-Mags, way before any of those bands.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
So, yeah.
Sorry,
you're good. You're good.
And so, the shows in New York, they were like ridiculous. You at Great Gildersleeve, shows would start at like 2:00 in the morning. I remember WNYU had that hardcore radio show called Noise the Show, and I actually won Black Flag tickets from WNYU. And I was like, oh my! And it was at a place that was called the Brooklyn Zoo. It was someplace in Brooklyn.
Wow.
And I remember I called them when I got the tickets. I was like, oh my God, Black Flag! They were like my favorite band. I was like, what time does the show start? And they said the show starts at midnight. Black Flag go on around like 2 or 3. And I was like, how the hell am I going to do that? I'm like 15 years old. I'm in junior high in Westchester. There was no way I could go.
What era of Black Flag was that?
I mean, this was Damaged.
Oh wow, are you kidding me?
This was really early.
That's unbelievable. That's like the best time to see them too.
Yeah, I know. So I didn't even. I won tickets, but I didn't go.
Oh, Jesus.
Bummer.
What a bummer, man. And so those are classic New York hardcore records you mentioned, by the way. Fucking and Heart Attack too, all that stuff. I go back and I'm just like, damn, it's so interesting to kind of just imagine what that era must have been like.
Yeah, and I used to listen to Noise the Show, which was that radio station, from WNYU. So I was always really intrigued with New York, although I never really went to shows there. And I guess the kind of first contact I had with New York hardcore was, me and Ray were in that band called Violent Children. Ray played drums. And we played a bunch of shows with Agnostic Front in Connecticut and in various weird places in New York State, not New York City. And so we actually kind of became friends with Roger and Vinny. And they were always they were always really cool to us. And Ray had actually been to a bunch of hardcore shows in New York. I think his brother lived in New York at the time, and he could sleep at his brother's house. So he went to A7, he went to CBGB's a few times, but I never went. I kind of popped my head into CBGB's just when I would go to New York City to get records. I would go to like Bleecker Bob's and records, 99 Records, and I would buy hardcore records because you couldn't get them anywhere else. But then CBGB started doing those hardcore matinees.
Right on Sundays.
Right in the afternoon on a Sunday. And it was so perfect for me. I was like, oh my God, this is like a dream come true. Because I could tell my dad, hey, I'm going to my friend's house. I would hop on the train. I would go to New York City. I would see the matinee started like 2:00 or something. I'd be home by like 7. And I would see these amazing shows. The first hardcore matinee I saw there was Agnostic Front, which was before United Blood even came out. It was Agnostic.
So this is with the original singer.
Actually, United Blood had just come out. United Blood had
Okay,
come
with
out.
Roger.
Yeah, Roger was singing. Victim in Pain wasn't out. This was the show where they were trying to raise money to pay for Victim in Pain.
Wow.
It was Agnostic Front, Death Before Dishonor, which was Mike Judge's band, and Mark Ryan from Supertouch sang. Mark Judge played drums. Ray Bees's band, they were called Skinhead Youth.
Right, right.
Ray Bees sang before Warzone, and Don Fury's band called Balls. He played guitar in like a power rock band, and that
We're
was
trying to get Don Fury on the show. We have to ask him about that.
yeah. He's cool. But man, I was so blown away just by that show. I mean, especially Agnostic Front. They were they were always incredible. I had seen them before that, but to see them at CBGB's, like at a matinee with like a sea of skinheads, you know, diving off the stage and just and I was actually really impressed with Roger too, because you know you heard all these things about New York City and CBGB's, and it's like a war zone, and you'll get killed if you go there, and it's all skinheads, and if you look punk, you're gonna get your teeth knocked out by a Doc Marten boot.
Right.
But at that show, Roger was saying all this stuff about it's scene unity. It doesn't matter if you're a punk, if you're a skin, if you're straight edge, and there's very few like straight edge kids back then. It was almost like walking.
Yeah, the fact that they were shouting out straight edge at all seems almost surprising.
Yeah, people hated straight edge. It was a really drug infested scene, and so Roger was just like super welcoming. He's like, we have to unite. It's the punks against the world. We're a small scene. We're the counterculture. People don't understand us. We got to stick together. We can't fight each other. And since they were like the kings of the scene, they set the tone for the whole scene. And so I felt
thank God for Roger.
Yeah, Roger and Vinny. I felt like, you know what? I have a place here. Like, this is cool. Like, I want to come back.
And it's he's still doing that today. He's really keeping that message alive. I could almost imagine from your perspective, feeling welcomed as a straight edge kid coming into a drug infested scene. Seeing somebody like Roger on stage saying that must have been life changing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even when we moved to New York, Youth Today eventually moved to New York. New Yorkers do not like outsiders. New Yorkers don't like suburban kids. When the suburban kids come to the shows, and these guys are like, living in squats in the Lower East Side, and like, they're like, we're the real deal. You guys are coming from your fancy houses in the suburbs. We don't like you. And I did live in a fancy house. You know what I mean? I was one of those kids, but I loved hardcore. I mean, nobody loved hardcore, more than me. I ate, slept, drank, hardcore. Like I was completely immersed in it. But when we first moved to New York, Roger and Vinny were really cool. Like we would go to matinees. They'd be like, this is Ray, this is Porcell. They're in this band Youth of Today. They're really good. We like them. They would they introduced us to a lot of people. And I tell you, I always say this. I always credit, Roger and Vinny, that we came into New York at a time where people were like so fucked up on drugs. For a couple of like loudmouth suburban kids to come into CBGB's and start like really getting loud about straight edge.
Right.
It's a miracle we didn't get our asses kicked. It's like a miracle.
Yeah.
Like we almost expected it. Like we're going to get killed. Like we would play CBGB's with X's on our hands, and like Ray, he's not going to shut up for anything. He's going to speak his mind.
No.
It was almost like, okay, we better get out of this club as fast as we can because people are going to kill us. But I think it was that stamp of approval from Roger and Vinny that really kind of like people were like, hey, Roger and Vinny like these guys. Don't mess with them.
Right. They really united the scene, I guess, because that seems to, the way that you articulate that seems to be almost very sensible in how maybe the youth crew scene, the straight edge scene, and how the more, well, let's just call it like the more like street part of the scene kind of merged and coexisted up until now. I mean, with like Judge playing the Black and Blue Bowl with Gorilla Biscuits, but you have your Mad Balls and your, your Agnostic Fronts and everybody in between. That credit must go to Roger and Vinny. Let me move on to a couple other things though, because I as I suspected, I was worried that we would run out of time, and Instagram will kick us off in about 20 minutes. But Youth of Today obviously was flying the flag for old school hardcore. I've heard you talk about SSD and 7 Seconds and just a lot of cool like real hardcore bands. What was the straw? I'm not trying to get you to talk badly about anyone's bands, but like, what was the straw on the camel's back for you during the early crossover period where you were like, man, this is a drag. I want to bring back the real hardcore sound. Like, what were some things that were going on that were kind of making you have like not the best taste in your mouth?
Man, I hate to talk smack on bands. There were a few records that broke my heart. No one loved SSD more than me. Like, right. I loved SSD. Like even to this day, SSD Get It Away, I think is one of the most groundbreaking, incredible hardcore records. It wasn't paint by the numbers. It was like, no one sounds like that even today. It was such a groundbreaking record. And then they came out with How We Rock and Break It Up. And it was just like, why do they want to be a rock band? Like, I got into hardcore because I wanted to get away from rock. Like, I thought rock is stupid. The lyrics are stupid. The whole rock star attitude is stupid. I don't want to be a part of that. I want to get away from that. I want to get into something real. And, even though I loved kind of like the aggression of early metal, like, I liked the first Metallica record as much as anybody else, but when you open the record and your first line is like, what is it? Black leather whips and chains. We're going to kick some ass tonight. Like, what's that first song? Hit the Lights.
Man, what's the first song on, was it Jump in the Fire maybe?
No, I think it was Hit the Lights.
Oh, it's Hit the Lights. It was Hit the Lights from Kill 'Em All.
Like the very first line is just so stupid. And I just listened to that and I'm just like, this doesn't speak to me, man. This is lame. So when bands started going rock, I hated that. That second DYS record where they had all these like arty pictures of them on the back of the record. I hate to say it, even that, Agnostic Front Calls for Alarm record, it really kind of like, I was so pumped for the Victim in Pain follow-up. And I was really sort of super confused about those lyrics were like kind of right-wing on that record. And, bands like Minor Threat had broken up. And, a lot of bands were going metal. A lot of bands were going rock.
You mentioned Uniform Choice. I heard you talking about on the podcast.
Well, Uniform Choice were still like, they probably hadn't even put out their record, at this point. This is like pre-Youth of Today. And it just seemed like, hardcore, no one was really interested in playing like old school hardcore anymore. And to me, that music was so powerful and so emotional, and it really kind of like dealt with topics that like a kid was going through and really spoke to the heart of like a teenager and all the things that a teenager would go through, especially like the 7 Seconds records, Minor Threat records.
Right.
And so the whole, mission statement of Youth Today is like, hey man, we're going to bring this back. That's the whole reason why we called the band Youth of Today. Like, it's a super generic name. It was on purpose because we want to say like, hey, this is like a rubber stamped hardcore name, Youth of Today. It was kind of like, it was in like an abuse song. It was in a Cause for Alarm song. So even the name Youth of Today made a statement like, we're into hardcore. Like that's what we're going to play. We're not over it. You guys may be over it. We're not.
Yeah, you have an aesthetic that was also very bold, with the with the hand with the X on it, and the way that you guys sort of dressed and all had a uniform. You know, the whole thing was so out of a movie. You know what I mean? And the video for No More, all that stuff. You really like made a statement with that whole thing. Um,
Every revolution has a uniform, they say. So
yeah, that's
Straight Edge
true.
Revolution was like that youth crew look.
Yeah. Whose idea was it to start a thing called Youth Crew? I was always wondering that.
You know, it's not like we set out to like start a youth movement or anything. We just had the song Youth Crew. It was actually it was very strange to me, but in a way it speaks to the power of music. Like, you know, we just had this idea that wasn't, you know, popular at the time, that we were just going to play really energetic, you know, fast hardcore, you know, with breakdowns and mosh parts and sing-alongs. And we were really into straight edge. We were really into vegetarianism. We were really into positive living. We weren't into macho bullshit. We weren't into like tough guy hardcore. You know, the stuff that really kind of like made the scene dark.
Right,
you know,
right.
We really weren't into that. And so when we started playing, the scene was very much like that. It was very kind of like dark place. I don't know if you remember CBGB's back then, but it was like,
I mean, I hear stories. I started going to CBGBs in the 90s, which was, there was some weird shit going on in the 90s for sure.
oh yeah, there was a whole weird violent revival in the 90s.
Yeah.
But it was kind
I
of,
definitely walked in
like
and was
that.
like, we should get out of here.
It was kind of like that in the mid 80s. And, you know, we just thought, you know what, we're just going to take a stance against this stuff.
Yeah.
And, you know, much to our surprise, there was a lot of kids that felt the same way. A lot of kids that wanted an alternative to the alternative. You know, they kind of dropped out of their, you know, high school clickiness, and they wanted something different. And so they got into punk. And then when they got into punk, they're like, now what am I getting into? There's people smoking meth and smoking crack, and there's fights. And am I going to get like a beer bottle knocked over my head because my mohawk's not right?
Right. It's just turning into, yeah.
And so when we kind of came out, we were just like bold about this message, like, you know, there's kind of like a better way to live. There's a more positive way to live. There's a cleaner way to live. Man, oh man, like in a very short time, it caught fire. And like the whole scene just kind of changed. And then there was all these like incredible bands, like, you know, Bold and Gorilla Biscuits were coming up. And then it turned into like a scene. And then like Youth of Today would play CBGBs, and there would be like 800 straight edge kids in line, and they were all kind of dressed sort of youth crewy. And
right. There was a movement.
the same thing. And next thing you know, we're going on tour, and all over the country, there's this like youth crew type scene of kids with big X's on their hands and champion hooded sweatshirts, and you know,
they still exist today. Yeah.
And it was, you know, within like a year of like Break Down the Walls coming out, it's just like, and this is like pre-internet. It's amazing. Just like, I don't even know how it happened. Right. It was kind of like a phenomenon. And it was, you know, to me, it speaks to the power of music. Like, music is such a powerful medium for communicating a message. Mm-hmm. And when you know, when you take that message and you marry it with like really strong, emotional, powerful music, man, oh man, you can create a revolution. And even in like our own little way, our whole little like youth crew, Gorilla Biscuits, you know, Youth of Today scene, we really created like a ripple effect that definitely went around America, and even went around like, you know, places like Europe at the time.
Absolutely. And Ray particularly is just such a, like the way you described that, like the way that Ray delivers his message is very deep and emotional and real and touching. And he just particularly has a persona that is very inspiring and makes you just want to get up and do something. You know what I mean? And that's not to take away from the other front man of those great bands that you mentioned, but Ray particularly was amazing. And and then you stepped it up. Hey, Porcell, I don't know how much time you have for us tonight, but I'm getting a little concerned because I do have more ground I wanted to cover with you in terms of shelter and other stuff. If we run out of time on the hour, it's going to kick us off. Can we start over again and get you for a little bit longer?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
You want to start
cool.
over again tonight, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like right as soon as we hit like 9 o'clock, I'm just going to start over again and have you rejoin, and everyone watching can rejoin us so we can get through other stuff. Perfect.
I'm good.
I love it. Awesome. I feel better about this now because I was getting nervous. So then you step it up. I know you did some great other projects, Side by Side, Project X. You know, it seemed like you're just having fun with your friends. It was so incestuous. You've been playing with Gorilla Biscuits for a little bit. But Judge was the next chapter where you took it to the next level. Same kind of message, but way more angry. How did you meet Mike Judge, and what was really the impetus for like wanting to transition from Youth of Today to Judge and doing something more aggressive?
When I first met Mike, he was a skinhead. I didn't meet him, but I saw him at an Abuse show at the Anthrax. And, you know, he was hanging out with a bunch of like scary, like New York and New Jersey skinheads. And I kind of took note of him because he danced in the pit so menacingly. He wouldn't even dance. He would just sit in the, like people, you know, back then people would do like a circle pit. But Mike would stand in the middle of the circle pit, at least at this one show, at this Abuse show. He would just kind of sit. He would like stomp his feet into the ground. And he would rake his face. And he would like, you know, go like this with his fist. He would like raise his fist. And I was like, man, check out this skinhead that's right in the center of the pit, losing his mind. And it was Mike Judge.
That's amazing.
But then when we moved to New York City, you know, Mike was still kind of like a, you know, he looked like a skinhead, but he was straight edge. And he actually, you know, he was at that first show. He played that scary first matinee that I went to, you know, with Agnostic Front, and he was in Death Before Dishonor, and he played drums. And so, you know, he came up to us and he was like, hey, I'm straight edge. I'm really into Youth Today. Super friendly, which was kind of which surprised me because a lot of those like New York skinheads were fucking, you know,
scary. Yeah, because he was a bit old.
Scary, you know, scary, aggressive, violent.
Right.
You know,
yeah, like he was rolling in that like first wave a little bit. So you know,
totally. He was totally in that whole first wave of, you know, crazy skinheads. But you know, he had gone straight edge, and he was super friendly and everything, and he kind of joined. You know, when Youth of Today had tryouts for drums, we didn't even really know him all that well, but he tried out for Youth of Today, and he was, you know, he had kind of like a cool style, and he had a cool look, and he seemed like a really cool guy, and you know, he was definitely into, you know, he was like, you know, we wanted a guy that was like knee deep into hardcore. You know, we didn't want somebody who was, we wanted somebody that's like, okay, let's get in that van and let's tour till the wheels fall off. I love hardcore. Right. And he was like one of those guys that definitely loved hardcore.
And his approach on the mic, man, like no one sounded like Mike Judge before that. Like he was the first of, I would say, what eventually you'd have a lot of more frontmen that approached you know, hardcore in the way that he did, but I would say that he was the first to kind of approach it that way with that growl and that scream.
Man, what a great voice that guy has, even to this day. I mean, you know, we were supposed to play a lot of shows this year, and his voice is just as good as ever. Like he's just got like a freaking roar. Yeah. Dude opens his mouth and it's just like, whoa. You know, so when Judge started, it was sort of a different thing because, you know, Mike's a way different guy than Ray Capo. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that's sort of cool about hardcore. You know, hardcore is sort of a cult of personality. It's, you know, it's very individual, you know, and it's very from the heart. And so people's personality really comes out in the music. And so Mike was always one of these sort of like for lack of a better term, sort of like a tortured guy. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I was gonna say that Vice documentary on Judge that everyone should check out. There Will Be Quiet Before the Storm. That tells his story where he really comes out and explains to everybody what his childhood was like and his family, and kind of you get a real good picture of why he was so angry and why his lyrics were so aggressive. Anybody watching, I mean, I'm assuming many of you seen it, but I highly recommend you go on YouTube and watch that Vice documentary on Judge. It's fantastic.
yeah, it was really good. It was really good. It was really good for getting inside of Mike's head. And he's not like the type of guy that really opens up too much. So they really got a lot of his personal life out of him, which was really cool.
No,
So Mike was very different. Mike was like coming more from like the dark side, which definitely had its drawbacks. Because those Judge shows were pretty violent.
Right.
You definitely get back the energy that you put out, which was nice about Youth of Today, because Youth of Today was such a positive, kind of like uplifting, inspiring thing that we never really had too many problems like that. In the early days we had problems because the punk rockers hated us, and the drunks, punks at the shows hated us, and there were fights and riots and crazy crap happened and getting beers thrown at us and stuff like that. But later on, we could we could play a club and literally 800 straight edge kids would show up.
Did you have to get into a lot of fights personally during that time, defending yourself? People fucking with you guys all the time because of the whole straight edge vegan thing?
Oh my God, every show. Like,
yeah.
First Youth of the Day tours, forget it.
Jeez.
There was riots. There was riots.
Right. Unbelievable. And because you guys
luckily we had, back then the lineup was me, Capo, Walter. Well, Walter wasn't really a tough guy, but we had Richie and Mike. Richie Birkenhead, who those dudes are scrappers.
I can't even picture it, but yeah, like because you guys are all so positive. In my mind, you're all these positive people. It's just hey man, you guys are all fit. I wouldn't fuck with you guys, but it's so hard to picture you guys, scrapping with people. But I'm sure you had to do it to defend yourself so much,
Yeah, I mean, me and Ray, we're not the type of guys that are going to look for a fight. But what are you going to do when you're like playing a show and some drunk dude with a mohawk is just chucking beer, full beer cans at your head, trying to like take you out for a whole show? Like, sometimes it's just like, you
can only
do what you got to do.
Right. The New York way.
And probably, the best fighter in the band was Richie. And
wow.
Richie is the nicest guy. If you ever met Richie, he's the nicest guy in the world. He's like a super sweet, nice guy.
I love Richie. Yeah.
But if you piss that guy off and you push him over that ledge, he's like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He will kill you.
We had Richie on the show. Yeah.
He flips.
He's great. I actually toured with Into Another, playing drums with Beyond last year, so we spent some time with them.
I'm sure he's mellowed out now, but back then, that Underdog song "Over the Edge," that's friggin' an autobiography. Like, he gets there's so many crazy stories about Richie. I was just telling Craig, and I met Craig and Gavin just the other day, and we were talking about fights and stuff like that. And one time Youth Today played in Arizona on that Break Down the Walls tour. Was it Break Down? It might have. Yeah, it was on the Break Down the Walls tour, and so we had that lineup with Richie and Mike in the band. All right, so Youth Today Break Down the Walls tour. We're in Arizona. We play the show at a pool hall. A whole gang of skinheads called the Sun City Skins show up. And of course there's going to be trouble. I mean, they walk in the door and we're like, okay, this is not going to end well. There's a whole bunch of straight edge kids there. We start playing. Of course, these guys, and these guys are drunk. They're super belligerent. They're throwing stuff at us, throwing beers at us. And I don't know what set it off. I think it was actually our roadie, RJ, was this kid from New Jersey. Some guy threw a beer, and he saw the guy threw a beer, and he grabbed a pool stick, and he kind of smacked it over the guy's head. The next thing I know, it's a full-on riot. It's like the Wild West in a saloon, and it's in a pool hall. So everybody's grabbing pool sticks. I got a pool stick. I'm like fighting this guy off like with a pool stick, like a freaking kung fu staff, trying to keep his skinhead away from me. People are grabbing pool balls and throwing them at each other. You get hit with a pool ball in the head like that. Hurts. So for just 5 minutes, there's this whole melee of just crazy. It's like a full-scale riot. Everybody in the whole place is just fighting. And so finally, the thing, after 5 minutes, the thing kind of spills outside. And then it turns into this whole, the good thing about back then is that New York City has such a hard reputation. Thanks to bands like Agnostic Front and the Cro-Mags.
Yeah.
New York City had this reputation that's it's a friggin' hard place. People are living in the streets or living in burnt out buildings. So people just people hear Youth of Today from New York City, and automatically people are a little scared of you.
Yeah, because
thank you, Cro-Mags.
Yeah. Where was this, by the way?
This was in Arizona.
In Arizona, okay.
Yeah. Okay. And so we all kind of spill outside, and so it was all our Youth of Today guys and our roadies, and then it's the Sun City Skins, and they way outnumber us. There's 20 of them. There's eight of us or something. So they could have easily fought us, but there was some kind of thing these guys are from New York City. Let's be a little cautious.
Right, because you don't want to fuck with these people. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there was this kind of standoff. It was almost like something. It was like something out of the movies, something out of The Outsiders or something. Wow. It's we're straight edge. We're facing a bunch of skinheads. We're outnumbered 2-1. We're trash talking each other. We're saying all this stuff we're from fucking New York City. You don't know who you're freaking messing with, Yeah. And we're going back and forth. There's this whole tension thing going on. So it's like a movie. Somehow or other, we say, okay, let's do this. Our biggest guy versus your biggest guy, one-on-one. Let's do this. Because we kept on saying yeah, you guys are outnumbered us 2-1. You guys are a bunch of pussies.
Right.
Whatever. Let's do it 8-on-8.
Let's make it even the score.
We're trying to even the score because and so finally, I don't know how it got to that point where we're okay, your biggest guy versus our biggest guy.
Uh-huh.
And they're yeah, let's do it. Let's not do it here. Let's go to McDonald's. Your biggest guy versus our biggest guy. And they had a big dude, a big skinhead dude. And so we're okay, Richie, you got to fight that big skinhead dude. And Richie at this point is he's over the edge. Right. So we get in the van and we're just pumping. Richie's already pissed. He's all ready to fight. We get in this van and we're pumping Richie up. We're Richie, fuck this guy up. And Richie's I will fucking kill this guy. Get me out of this van. He turns into a maniac. The guy, he's the nicest guy in the world. You get him into a fight, he turns into a maniac.
Oh, man.
Richie's foaming out of the mouth. We get to McDonald's. Richie rips the door open, runs out to these guys, and there's the guy, there's all the skinheads, and Richie's come on, bitch, come on, motherfucker.
Holy shit.
He's just going at it. And this skinhead just looks at Richie, and he's just okay, man, that's it.
Are you kidding me?
You guys, the guy totally punked out. The skinheads got in their car, and they drove off, and New York Hardcore won. Wow.
You know what, even had to get it. I mean, I'm sure you got hurt a little bit from earlier in the night, but still, that's fucking crazy, man. Richie, it's funny because these are all guys you grew up with, but I met Richie now, and I know Gavin now, so I never knew these guys. when this kind of shit was going on. So it's so hard to imagine. But that is an amazing story, man. Amazing story. Judge.
I mean, Gavin was tough too. I grew up with Gavin. I met Gavin when I was like 15. He went to the high school that was next to mine.
I mean, he's one of my closest friends, straight up my mentor. I've heard so many stories, and I know you guys grew up together. It's even hard for me to picture him in the streets doing shit, because he's been sober ever since I've known him. So it's just like, I can't even imagine.
You know what? He went to the rival high school of mine, and we were both on the football team.
Right.
My team played his football. The team that I was on, we won the bowl game that year. We won the championships in our leagues. We had a really good team. And so his team was also really good. And we went to his school and we played his team and we beat them. Wow. And it was like a huge rivalry, sort of like, the Yankees Red Sox kind of thing. In Westchester was a huge rivalry. So we were feeling like, yeah, really cool. And there was a party at his school that weekend, and we're like, we're going to put it in their face. Our whole football team's going to go to their party. And so we went to their party, and the whole football team was there. And there was, of course, it's like tension. I wasn't drinking, but everybody's getting drunk and everybody's getting loud, and you just knew there was going to be a fight. And so we had a guy on our football team that was like the toughest kid in the school, like this guy, and Gavin starts getting loud with him.
Wow. And
so I knew Gavin from the punk scene. I knew Gavin from the Anthrax. I was friends with him, and he was into punk. He was like a metalhead, but he was into punk.
Right.
And so Gavin's drunk. This guy's drunk. I'm straight edge, probably the only one sober at this party. And so I pull Gavin aside, and I'm like, Gavin, you're drunk, dude. Don't fight this guy. He's the toughest guy in our school. He's going to effing kill you, dude. Like, just chill out. I'm your friend. I'm sober, man. I'm trying to give you like some advice here. And Gavin's just like, nah, man, I can take this guy. I was like, dude, you're going to lose. He's the toughest guy in the whole school. Like, trust me, man. Trust me. Sure enough, these guys get in a fight, and Gavin kicks his ass.
Dude, Gavin is badass.
I couldn't believe it. Gavin kicked his ass.
Gavin is wild, dude. I fucking love.
You don't want to fight Gavin. You don't want to fight Gavin.
Absolutely not. Are you out of your mind? Jesus.
Don't fight Gavin. Don't fight Richie. Just trust me. Even probably today, Richie will go over the edge and throw a knife at you or something. He just like talking.
Oh man, it reminds me of training with Craig Satari, and Gavin was a bit intimidating, but it's just not about me. We're not going to go on that path. So Judge eventually disbanded, going back to the bands. You reunited for the Black and Blue Bowl. How long did you not hear from Mike Judge or speak to him up until that time? And how did you guys even find him?
I had no idea where he was. I had no idea. You heard all these things. Mike's in a bike gang. Which there was definitely some truth to.
Right.
Mike was he was in pretty deep in some pretty, outlaw shit for many years. So, it was funny because, Judge broke up and I practically never saw the guy again.
Yeah. I mean,
it was just like he never went to show. He really just kind of like dropped off the radar. I didn't see him for years. The only person that really got, and people had kind of seen him every now and then, and people were saying like, yeah, Mike, man, do another Judge show, do a Judge reunion or something. And Mike would just be like, no effing way.
Wow.
I'm not into that anymore.
Is he still Edge today, or?
Yeah. And he was, I believe he was straight as the whole entire time. Like he was never a type of guy that was into doing drugs or, if you saw the movie, he had a lot of like family trauma that involved drugs and alcohol. So from like a really young age, he just, kind of turned his back on the whole thing.
I love that he remained Edge this whole time though, because of how important the band is and was. How did you get him though? Like I think I heard different stories. Civ was the one that found him.
Yeah, I actually didn't get him. Civ was the one that found him and got him and talked him into it. And let me tell you, Mike didn't come easily. Like right. Civ worked on him for 6 months.
Wow.
Right?
What was
to play that Black and Blue show.
What were the practices like? The first practice with Mike Judge?
Fantastic.
Wow.
That first practice was like we didn't skip a beat. Like everybody was friends. Mike was super cool. We caught up. We had fun. We made jokes. It was like not a day had gone by. It was really cool, really organic. I hadn't seen Matt Pincus, the bass player, that much either. And we just kind of walked in there to that practice, and everything was just like awesome and really, really cool.
That show was really magical. I was at that show at Webster Hall. Unbelievable. Now, I'm going to move on to Shelter in a second, but in terms of Judge, if you can't tell me, no biggie, but, I've heard rumors about new material. Is that something that could happen?
Could happen.
Okay.
We'll see. We'll see.
All right. We'll cross our fingers. Now, okay. We're going to try to get
keep us inspired, man. If you want to hear new Judge stuff, tell Mike, tell Sammy.
I talk to Sammy often, so
push us a little bit. We need a good push in that direction. So if you want new Judge stuff, encourage us.
Well, I'll talk to Sammy. Plus, I want Mike Judge on the show, and I think that he was watching earlier. I don't know if he's still watching now, but love to get you on the show, Mike. And
Mike lives in upstate New York now. He moved to Albany, so he's not far away from me too.
Oh, okay, cool.
So hopefully, him being close will help that.
Awesome. I hope that happens. Well, so okay, I know you've talked about all this other stuff a lot, but it seems like you're into the trip down memory lane. Shelter forms, but originally you're not in Shelter right away. You did the Rand Porcell thing, and then at what point did you join Shelter? And maybe talk a little bit about how Hare Krishna entered your life, and bring me up to speed. What does it mean? What does it mean to you today, and how does it still play a role in your life? I know that's a loaded question. I'm sorry.
Well, I was, like I said, when I moved to New York City, New York City is a really amazing place. There's no place like New York City. It's a really it's not only a melting pot of people and cultures and walks of life. It's really like a melting pot of ideas too. And so when I moved to New York City, like all these ideas like vegetarianism and, health food and, eventually that kind of like path of hanging out at like health food stores, got me into like yoga and, Eastern thought and Eastern philosophy and, all kinds of just new ways of thinking and looking at the world that, for me kind of growing up like a sheltered suburban kid, I just never even thought of before. I was never kind of like exposed to these things. And so I think, and like you said, at the time, early to mid 80s, the New York hardcore scene was a real scary place. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then I think the whole youth crew thing and that whole like positive wave of hardcore was like a real shot in the arm for New York hardcore. It really kind of lifted it up a little bit. It became an inspiring place, became a lot less violent, a lot more of a friendly place. And even all the bands got together, and I'm not saying that like, I don't even want to credit Youth Today for that because, Agnostic Front, Roger and Vinny certainly set that tone even in the beginning.
Right.
But like you said, starting around like the early 90s, shit got dark again.
It certainly did.
Like it got even, in 1983, you would go to, CBGB's or you would go to a matinee. You may get in a fight. You may get a bottle broken over your head. You may get a black eye. But, 1991, like you're going to a show, you might get shot.
Right.
There was shootings at CBGB's. There was knifings at like a lot of shows. Like shit was getting real. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and it was around that time that you know, I got jumped. I got beat up by like 10 skinheads at a Bad Brains show.
Jesus, was it related to the youth crew thing, or your
It was because I was straight edge.
Got it. But they knew who
And
you
they
were.
just didn't like straight edge, and they were like, "Okay, this guy represents straight edge. Let's beat the shit out of him." And it
Damn.
was 10. It was 10-on-1, and luckily it wasn't worse because I somehow managed to kind of like, get out of there pretty fast.
Wow.
But you know, it got to the point where it was just like, this isn't the same thing like it was, back when it was a family and it was going to agnostic front shows, and it's punks and skins versus the world, and we're all in this together. And that was very much a family vibe back then.
Yeah.
And then after that, it was just like, you know what, this isn't my family anymore.
Right.
And so I was kind of getting out of hardcore, plus, I was in Gorilla Biscuits, actually. I was in Gorilla Biscuits at the time. And we were actually working on a new record. Things were going good. We toured, we had just toured Europe. It was a really super successful tour. And then, Walter did Quicksand. And Quicksand was such a rising star. And justifiably so. I mean, it was like really new and fresh.
Oh yeah, he flipped.
It was a whole new sound, and Walter just took that ball and he ran with it. And I get it, but he sort of just like, he just, even though Gorilla Biscuits we were like 7 songs into a really like good record, he just dropped the ball on the whole thing. He went and he did Quicksand and whatever. I get it.
Right.
So I wasn't in a band. Hard, the scene was like super violent, and it just didn't have the same feeling for me anymore. And so I was just sort of getting into other stuff, and the stuff that I was getting into was like Eastern. It was the stuff that it was more of that kind of like, my quest for like health and wellness, which was like a really big part of my life too.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was more of getting into, stuff like that. And I was getting into like alternative diets and raw foods and meditation and all different kinds of books. There used to be a bookstore, I believe it was on Fifth Avenue. It was called East West Books.
Right.
I would spend all my money at that place. Like I was just buying book after book after book of anything that I could get my hands on. Taoism, meditation.
What about that Krishna temple? There's a Krishna temple that's on, is it Second Avenue or First Avenue? And like kind of like almost at Houston. Was that the temple that you guys would go to?
No, that place wasn't open yet.
Oh, okay.
It was open in like the 60s and the 70s, and it closed. And then it reopened in like the mid 90s or something like that.
Okay.
So that place wasn't open. There was a small Krishna temple that was on Greenwich Avenue that I would go to a lot, and they would give Bhagavad Gita classes there, and that was interesting to me. And so I was just starting to get into all this more metaphysical, meditational stuff, which was just sort of like an offshoot of what I was into in Youth Today.
Yeah.
And that led me to, getting into Krishna consciousness, getting into chanting, getting into meditation. It's funny too, because stuff like that seems so counterculture, and it wasn't really part of the mainstream conversation. Even stuff like yoga was super weird. Like if you did yoga in the late 80s or the early 90s, you were a weirdo. Like
right.
You do yoga? What are you, fucking weird?
Right.
It was like, it's so hard to believe, because things like yoga and veganism and like vegetarianism, they're just part of the mainstream culture now.
Which is great.
But back then it was a very strange thing to do.
Yeah, for sure. And you guys were at the forefront of a lot. I give you and a lot of people in the scene that were your friends so much credit for being at the forefront of what is now so accessible and huge, which is great specifically in New York, because it's a totally mainstream thing now. Look at the East Village now. It's a different place, and in the health conscious way, and all that, it for the better. You know, it's worse for other reasons in terms of the sort of like the lack of arts being supported and all that. But in terms of the health consciousness and alternative lifestyles and stuff like that, you know, it's great. You guys all put in the work for that. So
Yeah, if you had, but when youth of today were in our like no more phase, when we were really kind of like, trying to, push vegetarianism. If you had told me back then, like whatever, 1988, that in a few short decades, there was going to be a chain of giant supermarket health food stores called Whole Foods that was going to that would be in every single major city, I would not have believed it. I wouldn't have believed it. Like,
yeah, it's so funny.
Even New York City, which was a huge city, we only had 3 health food stores. I know there was only 3. There was actually 4 health food stores. I know because I worked at 3 of them. The only one that I didn't work at was Intro Yoga, which Mackie from the Cro-Mags' mother used to work at.
Interesting. Yeah.
So even in a place like New York City, like health food and vegetarianism, it wasn't big. In probably like the biggest city in the world, New York City, it wasn't big. So it was a very kind of underground thing. And just to see what it turned into now, it's just, it blows my mind. It blows
I want to give a shout out to Organic Grill while we're on that topic.
Love Organic Grill.
Yeah, I was actually just talking to Vlad.
Vlad's a great guy. I love Vlad. Love Organic Grill.
Yeah, if you're in New York City, guys, and you're plant-based or vegan, go visit Vlad at the Organic Grill on. I don't want to mess up the address. I think it's on First Avenue.
Is it on First Avenue? Yeah, it's on First Avenue. It's on First Avenue between I think it's 6th and 7th. It's actually the exact location of Prana Foods, which was the first health food store that I worked at.
Oh, okay. So there you go. There's history there. That's awesome. I'm gonna breeze through this next. I got 2 or 3 more questions for you before we let you go. But Shelter put out amazing records. That was for me my introduction to a lot of stuff, and then I had to go backwards into your catalog. But the band got really successful with the Roadrunner release of Mantra. And then you eventually had these huge tours with like No Doubt and these big festivals. You did Beyond Planet Earth. And after when 20 Summers passed, there was a long hiatus. Why did you guys, what was going on? Because you got so big and it seemed like there was so much promise. And then there was this long hiatus. What was the deal when you guys decided to take a break?
Basically, I got married and had my son.
Okay. Life happened.
Yeah. And Ray had moved to California, and he got married to a woman who had 2 kids.
Okay.
And so, very quickly, I don't know if you have kids or not, but
no, single.
if you have little kids in the house, you're not going on tour for. Sure. I mean, part of the success of Shelter was we toured incessantly. Mm-hmm. We would tour all year round, and that's what that's the reason. That's part of the reason why the band got so big. We were just so, inexhaustibly traveling nonstop all around the world.
Yeah,
we really supported those records, and that's really how the band, the band got really big. I mean, it was so surprising.
Yeah, there's some great footage of you guys playing overseas for thousands and thousands of people. And I remember watching it really kind of jump when I'm like, man, I just saw these guys at Coney Island High. Now they're headlining Irving Plaza, and it wasn't that long of a gap, That was wild.
Yeah, it was funny too, because it was right around that time that all these bands started getting signed by major labels.
Right.
Punk was exploding. Green Day was huge. Rancid put out that record that got really big. So every major label was looking for. The Offspring were huge.
Yeah.
So every major label was looking for the next Green Day and the next Offspring. So around that time, we were actually getting courted by every single major label.
So wild.
I mean, every weekend we would go out with another major label that would take us to some like, you know, super high scale vegetarian restaurant in New York City. You know, we would rack up like a, you know, $400 bill ordering every appetizer and 5 drinks.
Fuck yeah.
And and it was funny too, because I remember we got the deal with Roadrunner, and we were almost like disappointed. We were almost like, you know, because Roadrunner, like, they were still kind of like an independent label. They weren't like, you know, Epic Records, or, you know, they weren't like, you know, they weren't like MCA or, you know, Warner Brothers or something like that.
Right.
And we were really hoping like, oh, we were going to get signed to, you know, this big major label, and we were going to get huge. But it was funny because a lot of those punk bands that signed to the majors, nothing really happened with them. They put out one record, you know,
dropped.
if you're on a major label and you put out one record and you're not selling 500,000 records, or at least like, you know, 200,000 records, you're going to get dropped. Like, they don't care about you.
Yeah, you know? It's a machine. Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, it's a machine. It's a business. But luckily, you know, Roadrunner was just big enough, and they were getting really big. You know, they had gold records. They had like, you know, really high selling artists.
Yeah. But
everybody that worked at Roadrunner loved the music. Like, they were fans of the bands. They loved heavy music.
Yeah.
They loved Shelter. Like, our publicist, she loved, her name was Sue Marcus. She loved Shelter. Like, Shelter was one of her favorite bands.
Yeah.
You couldn't believe the press that this girl was getting for us. We were doing press non-stop with huge magazines, Spin Magazine, Guitar Player Magazine, you know, Metal Hammer, you know, whatever, like big
all of it, yeah.
Were doing things back then. I mean, our press book was like this.
Right.
And it was all because she just liked the band, and she championed the band, you know, because she just genuinely loved the band. And she called up all these magazines, like, really passionately, like, you got to hear this band, you know. And it's people that are like that. They're invaluable.
She's still in business. My day job is that one of the guys that runs Revolver magazine, and she emails us all the time.
Yeah, I think she works for a major label now. I'm not really sure what she was doing, but man, she really went above and beyond the call of duty for Shelter. She was amazing. She was just amazing. And everybody that worked there was so super passionate about the band and the record. And, you know, they had like, and the good thing about Roadrunner is that they had like, it wasn't just America. They were big all around the world.
Yeah, worldwide.
You know, they were big. They were big, you know, due to Sepultura, they were huge in South America. I mean, Sepultura was like the Metallica of South America. You have no idea how big that band was.
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah. And then
so, you know, Shelter would tour South America, and, you know, our video was #1 on MTV. They had a top 20 countdown on MTV, and Shelter, Here We Go Again, was the #1 video on MTV. I mean, that's mind blowing for us.
It is.
And so it was like a really magical time that we actually got to kind of like flirt with being rock stars. You know, we're going on tour with No Doubt. We're playing arenas. I mean, that was like a wild time too.
Yeah, beyond planet Earth. So let me ask you this though: do you think Shelter will ever have new material again in the future, or is that?
I really hope so. I would love to do a new Shelter record.
Okay.
Just because, you know, Shelter is, you know, probably out of all my bands, I think Shelter's probably the one that's really the closest to my heart, because you know, to this day, I'm still very much, you know, into bhakti yoga. You know, back then it was like Hare Krishna, and it was like a weird kind of like culty thing. Now it's called bhakti yoga, and it's super popular all over the world. And things like, you know, chanting and meditation and chanting mantras on beads and kirtan, those things are like mainstream. Like, you'll go to these yoga festivals now with like, you know, 50,000 people, and you'll have people doing kirtans and chanting, you know, Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, and it's not weird anymore. It's
right.
In yoga, you know, yoga's huge, and that part of yoga, and you know, that kind of meditational part of yoga is huge. It's just mind blowing, man. to me that
No, it's great.
these
It's
things
great.
become actually like big. And that you have a place like Lululemon that's in every mall where you can buy yoga clothes now. I mean,
Oh my God,
back
it's
when
so
I was
funny.
doing up dog and down dog, you know, and people would look at me weird in the park, you know, it's weird. Like all the stuff we were into when we were kids somehow got mainstream. It's kind of cool.
I see what you're saying though. Like the shelter encompasses everything I think that you've ever kind of championed in one band. You know, it's like, you know, Judge is one thing, Youth of Today is one thing, but Shelter really kind of takes it all, and you gave a lot to it. So I sure hope that we get some new Shelter music, and we had a comment from above, which was one of my last questions. But is it true that Bold is sitting on some new material that we're just kind of hoping will come out one day?
You know, I'm not really sure what's going on with those Bold guys. I mean, I just talked to Drew in that Where It Went podcast.
Yeah.
Because he played drums on Break Down the Walls.
Yep.
But I haven't really talked to those guys that much
Okay.
in probably like the past year. So I'm not really sure what's going on with Bold.
Yeah. All right. You know,
You got to get those guys on.
we'll get them on. We'll get them on. Shout out to Vinny Hooligan. I saw that he joined us for a second, who was playing drums with Bold and Youth of Today and Shelter for a bit. I think we're gonna wrap it up now.
I love Vinny Hooligan. Vinny, shout out to Vinny Hooligan.
Great drummer.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
Yeah, him and I go back to the Long Island hardcore scene, man. There he is.
Hey.
Yeah. But yeah, Porcell, I think we're going to wrap it up. We've had you for an hour and a half, and we appreciate your time. And it's amazing that you are just doing everything that you do. Want to let everybody know real quick about what you're doing with yoga, how they could follow you and sign up for your retreats or classes or anything you're offering online. Just let everybody know anything that they should be aware of in terms of your work.
My Instagram is The Hardcore Yogi. You can see it up at the top there. And I give daily yoga classes 6 days a week at 10 a.m. New York time every single day from Monday through Saturday. I take Sunday off.
Oh, wow.
And it's been really successful. There's a lot of people that show up every single day, and it's always growing. So if you want to take some yoga classes with me, they're really fun. They're really strong yoga classes, really good workout. Vinny Hooligan's been in my class a bunch of times. And I'm going to start doing retreats. I'm going to start doing, I record all the classes too. So I'm probably going to, what I eventually want to do over the next couple of months is do like a yoga podcast. And then I'm going to put all the recorded classes on Patreon. So you can pay like, if 10 a.m. New York time doesn't really work into your schedule, which a lot of people have told me, I really want to take your class, but I just can't do it at 10 a.m. New York time. There's people all around the world, in the hardcore scene that kind of want to, take yoga with me. So I'm eventually going to I have like a library of classes because I've been doing it for months now, 6 days a week. I'm going to put those all online. You can pay one price per month. You can do all those old classes, pre-recorded, whenever you want to do them. So that's going to be happening pretty soon. So follow me at The Hardcore Yogi. Check out my classes every day. You can DM me to find out how you can sign up for those classes. And it's really exciting. Like I get a lot of people that know nothing about hardcore, and then I also get a bunch of hardcore kids on there too.
Sounds like Gavin's gym.
Yeah, it is like Gavin's gym. It's the best of both worlds, and I'm really excited to do it. I'm really passionate about it, and I would love to have all you guys out there check out my class.
Awesome. I think I'm going to take you up on that and join you at some point. So
please do, man.
Yeah. Porcell, thank you for being on this episode, man. Really appreciate it. And I definitely hope that we can see you in person one day again when things become normalized. And we'll definitely be seeing you at one of your online yoga classes soon.
Yeah, let's hope we can have live music again. This has been the weirdest year of my life.
Dude, it's really weird, man. I don't know when hardcore is coming back, but the last show I saw was Gorilla Biscuits, and I'm so thankful for that. Right before the shit went down, I saw Gorilla Biscuits.
Yeah, luckily I did a ton of touring right at the end of 2019. Youth Today went to Europe. Judge went to Europe. Youth Today went to the West Coast, Judge went to the West Coast, and then right at the end, Shelter played a whole bunch of East Coast tour dates, like at the end of December. And then I went to India, and this is so weird. Like, this is the first year that I haven't played a show since I was like 16. I mean,
well, when it comes back, it's going to be amazing, more than it ever was.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm really looking forward to, I love doing it. I love playing shows. So hopefully next year we can all get together again and celebrate some music.
Yes. And just real quick, I saw some people from the Philippines. I'm Filipino, and I saw there were some straight edge Filipino people watching. So thanks to you for watching.
Man, let me tell you, Judge played the Philippines. We went to the Philippines and played a show. It was the first time we played the Philippines. Whoa, those shows were great. Oh my God.
You got to find that online. That's crazy.
The Filipino hardcore scene is off the hook. If you're in a band and things open up, go play the Philippines. We had an incredible show there.
I want to, man.
That's amazing.
Well, thank you so much, Porcell. You have a good evening, and you have a good class tomorrow morning, and I'll hopefully see you soon.
All right, brother. Thank you.
Take care, my friend. Okay, bye.